All right, so we're going to talk about how to instantiate things. Specifically, we'll talk about how to shoot projectiles like bullets or lasers. But what we're really talking about is how to create a new game object in your scene while the game is being played. Okay, so what I've got here so far is just I took from the video Moving Without Physics, I took that rocket script, and I just have a rocket literally over here in the hierarchy. I have a camera, I have the background, and I have the rocket. And the only one script I have is not that many lines. It just gets whether the user is pressing left or right or up or down, and then it applies it to point in that direction and move. And that's it. That's my entire script. I have a speed that I could adjust, okay? So what I did is I went online and I found, I just Googled, literally, what did I Google? Laser transparent PNG. I found this random image. I already downloaded it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it over into my project, okay? So let's minimize all this. Okay, so here's my laser. I'm going to pull up Unity, drag it in. I'll just drag it directly into my scene. The layering isn't what I want, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go show up in the front. I'm going to change the order in the default layer. Now that's too big for me, so I'm going to first put this in my sprites folder so it's organized. And in my sprites folder, I'm going to take the laser and I'm going to say render it at a higher resolution. So I don't know, let's say 500. Let's see what that looks like. That's pretty good. I think I'm going to go with like 700. That seems better. Okay, that's perfect for me. So now I've got my laser in the scene, and I know that over here I can create now a prefabs folder. And when I'm ready, I'll put my laser in there, okay? I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a really simple script to this laser, okay? It's not going to have a collider. It's not going to have anything on it. But I'm just going to make something called laser controller. And all this laser, and so notice I just typed in any name here on the add component. And if it's not a recognized name, it goes, oh, you mean you want to create a new script with that name? And then add it? And I go, yeah, I do. So I'll just hit enter. And it does that. It takes a second to load. And then once it's loaded, I'm going to say, you know what? So now let's go ahead and edit that. So I've got this blank laser controller script. All I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I want to take my transform.position and I want to add to it whatever direction I'm pointed in. So plus equals, I'm going to put a space there just for clarity. Transform.right. Now in 3D, you'd say transform.forward. That's forward on the z-axis. In 2D, the z-axis is into the screen and like straight at the camera. So nothing would appear to move, even though the z values would change. Transform.right is talking about essentially right in 2 dimensions, or the vector 1 for x, 0 for y, 0 for z. That's what transform.right says, except it changes with the rotation and position of your game object. So I want to add whatever direction I'm pointing, because look at my game. Transform.right is my rocket. When I press play, if I'm pressing up, I'm pointed up. If I'm pressing down, what was right on my rocket, this was the right, is now pointed down. So I want to get that direction, okay? And I want to add that direction to my current position. Except I always want to be able to adjust the speed. So I'm going to say times some move speed. So I'm going to go up here, but get rid of the start. I don't need that. I'm going to say public float move speed. And I'm going to go ahead and save this, okay? So now my script will just move my laser in whatever direction it's pointed, okay? Except right now, if I click on my laser, oh, I'm in play mode. Right now, if I click on my laser, the move speed always starts at 0 if I just make it public and don't give it a starting value. So let's start it at 1. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Press play. Whoa, way too fast. Okay, let's go with 0.1. And let's try that again. Ooh, that's nice. I like that. Okay, so I'm going to do something here. I'm just going to change its Z rotation. Again, X and Y would do funky things where it's rotating around this red axis, so you can't really tell what's going on. Control Z that. Y, it would be going around the green axis. That's not what we want. We always want to be in 2D, rotating the Z axis, the in and out of the camera. We want to spin around that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change that rotation a little bit. Let's say it's pointed up in this direction. Let's see what happens when I press play. Because that was the direction the laser was pointed in, I'm adding the current direction, so it's going that direction. Okay, great. That's exactly what we wanted. So I'm going to Control Z a couple times, so I'm back at 0, 0. Or I could even go like this. I could go to my gear and hit reset. That puts it at the center of the screen with 1 scale and 0 rotation. Okay, I can move my rocket and my laser wherever I want. Whoa. I clicked on the camera there. So I can move my rocket wherever I want. Okay. So now what I want is I want to be able to shoot this. But I don't want to have the laser in the scene to shoot it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it into my prefabs folder. So now I've got a prefab version of that laser. Every single one I pull into the scene has a script that just says keep on going wherever you're pointing. So now I'm going to delete the laser that's actually in my scene. But I want to be able to create one in the scene whenever I want. So I'm going to go into my rocket controller script here, okay? Here's my rocket controller script. And in the update, which is getting called every single frame, I'm going to say if I put in some input, okay? Specifically, I'm going to say I get a button. Again, getting a key specifically uses the keyboard. Getting a button says Unity, handle whatever they're using. If they're using a joystick, a phone, etc., you figure out what button fire or jump is, and that way it's more malleable, adaptable. So I'm going to use get button down, so it'll only happen once, even if they hold the key for a solid minute. Get button down is only true once. And then we could go to Unity and say, you know what are the inputs we have? So project settings inputs, we have a fire 1, fire 2, and fire 3. So that could be like a and up here too. So we have like maybe a punch 1, a punch 2, and a punch 3 or something like that in the Street Fighter game. And we could rename these. We could add new ones to this array. So we can adjust those. But I'm going to use the default fire 1, which says the positive button is the left control button on my keyboard. I'm going to go ahead and use that. So I'm going to say whenever the user presses the fire 1 button, okay? I'm going to go ahead and rather than writing the code in here, I'm just going to say do the fire function, okay? Or I don't even know, let's call it shoot laser, okay? And so what I'm going to go do is now below the void update, I'm going to create my own method. I'm going to call this void shoot laser, okay? It's got no inputs. And then in there, all I want to do is say I want to literally instantiate a game object. So I'm going to say instantiate, and then here it says the object original. So one overloaded version of this function is I can just put in the object. So I don't have a way to reference the object. So what I'm going to do up here is create a public game object. So now I can reference it in the Unity UI. And then I'm going to specifically reference the laser prefab. That way I'm not having to find something in my scene. I can use a prefab that's not even in my hierarchy, but I'm going to click on my rocket and I'm going to drag this in to the laser prefab. Okay, so I got my laser prefab ready. So now that I have that, I can instantiate the laser prefab. Okay, and there we go. I don't know where it's going to pop up, what direction it's going to be pointing, but it's ready. However, of course, I put shoot later. That's why this is still showing up as red. So shoot laser. There we go. But I don't want to do that. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to go comma. And again, it shows me the next overloaded method. So what I can do now is the method I want to use is I want to tell it where to pop up and in what direction I want it to be pointed. So this rocket controller script is attached to the rocket. So I'm going to say show up in my transform.position. So wherever the rocket is, that's where I want the laser to pop up when I hit shoot. And then here it's saying, and what rotation do you also want? So it says, okay, what's the original object? And where do you want to instantiate it? And what rotation? And I'm going to say, you know what? Just take whatever direction my transform.rotation is. So that's talking about the rotation of, since I'm saying transform, it's going to the rocket controller. So it's on the rocket game object, saying take my position and my rotation and make the laser prefab there, pointed in that direction. So I'm going to hit save. And if there's no errors, I'm going to go over here. Unexpected symbol. Let's see. Okay. Prefab, that's an old message. Okay, I was a little worried there. So I'm going to drive around and choo, 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 choo. As I hit control, I got rockets shooting out in every direction. What? And I can do it so fast. I got no delay speed at all. Okay, so one thing is, I don't like the laser showing up in the middle of my game object. So what I'm going to do, oh man, and look at all these. This is freaking crazy. Look at all these. So I'm going to do two quick little tricks here, okay? So one is on my rocket, that's centered, and you can change the pivot of a sprite or of a game object. Right now it's in the middle of my rocket. I like that. It rotates the way I want it to rotate. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create an empty child of this. And I'm going to call this my laser spawn, let's see, this laser spawn location, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over a little bit. I want my lasers to spawn right here, like right outside of my rocket, maybe like a little closer, and I can adjust that. Now notice that, like, if I were to hit play, and oh, I should put a little image in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a, whoops, let's get rid of this. I'm going to add a Sprite Renderer to this, and I'm going to just throw a little thing in there. So let's do, for a sprite, let's throw a little beach ball, a beach ball in there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change its scale to, like, I don't know, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, random. But so now I've got a little dot there. So notice, because it's a child of my rocket, as I click play and I drive my rocket around, it always stays in that same location, because as a child of this game object, its transform, position, and rotation follow in terms of the rocket. So now that spawn location will have the correct location and rotation that I want. So what I could do now is go in here and I could create another public game object and reference the laser spawn location, and I could name it whatever I want. And then down here where it says, where do I want to spawn my laser? I'll say I want to spawn it in my laser spawn location dot its transform position, not the transform position of the game object I'm on, if I got rid of that, but instead the game object laser spawn location, its location. Okay, so I'm going to save that. I'm going to go back in here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove, so clicking on this, I'm just going to remove the sprite renderer, so this won't show up at all. Or yeah, I could click this checkbox right here and just have it not show up and leave the sprite renderer. Maybe I want to do that because later I'll want to see that. Okay, so let's see what happens now. As I click control, something's not working. Oh, I never assigned it. Classic. So clicking on the rocket, that's empty. I never assigned the laser the laser spawn location. So I'll grab this and drag it over. Perfect. Okay, now I'm going to hit play mode and choo, choo, choo. That's a little more realistic, but it still kind of looks like it's coming from inside. So I'm going to take my laser spawn location. I'm going to move it out just a little bit. And let's try that again. And oh yeah, that looks sweet. Okay, but you're noticing I'm having this crazy amount of lasers here, and they never disappear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this scene. It's got an asterisk here, so I'm saving my main scene. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my scripts, and I've only got the rocket control. Oh, did I not? I never moved the laser control. I'm going to go ahead and drag that in scripts. Okay, so now in my scripts, I've got both the rocket controller and the laser controller. Now the laser controller, all it does is one line of code. It moves my laser in whatever direction it's pointing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this script, okay? Let's close that and reopen it. It's because I moved it. It was a little angry at me. So I'm going to reopen it. Okay. So now what I want to do is I want to say, hey, I'm going to bring back that start function. So void start. So when this game object is created in the scene, I want to initialize it to do something. And you know what I want it to do? I want to destroy itself. Now, the way you refer to this object is with a lowercase g game object, okay? However, if I do that, then the second it gets created, it destroys itself. But destroy has this awesome overloaded method where you just hit comma, And now you could put in a float t, the amount of time to delay before destroying it. So I'm going to say delay, I don't know, 2f. So 2 seconds, and then destroy it. Let's even go like a 0.5 seconds or 0.8 seconds, something so we can see it happen in the scene. So every single laser, because this is attached to every laser, after I create it, the second it's loaded, it's going to start a ticking self-destruct for 0.8 seconds. And then it's just going to keep on moving itself forward every frame. So I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to click play. And let's try some shooting. Oh! Notice they're all destroying after 0.8 seconds. So, and you notice over here, there's no clutter now in the hierarchy. We don't have 100 rigid bodies floating in every direction, calculating physics. Like, that doesn't eat up the processing of your computer. So that's a nice way to handle that. All right, that was it. That's how to create something. You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and add one thing. We can call it good if that's all you want. But if we want to handle physics, there's one other thing you might want to do, and that's you might want to be able to add a force to the object, so you need a way to reference it. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to totally delete this script, okay? I'm going to say there is no such thing as laser controller anymore. So I'm going on to my prefab with laser, and I'm just going to get rid of that. Okay, so now this laser doesn't move. So if I was in play mode, okay? So let's go to, because it was a prefab, it wasn't in the hierarchy, changes I made did save. So now if I click play and I instantiate my laser, since it has no script, it just stays where it's at. But what I want is I want to have this thing with like cool physics and rigid body, and I want it to go wherever I want it to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my prefab here, and I'm going to go ahead and add a rigid body 2D. Okay, I don't want it to have gravity. I don't want it to just fall, but I do want it to have those calculations. So maybe I want it to bounce off of things like that. So now when I go into my rocket script, I'm instantiating this laser, but I want a way to refer to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say over here, whoops, I'll just click over here. I'm going to say create a new game object. Okay. Let's call it current laser, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and instantiate this. And I'm actually not so certain about this. When you instantiate, I'm pretty sure this works without the casting, but I've just seen this done in a lot of videos, so I'm going to keep it as is because it works. So we cast that as a game object, okay? I'm pretty sure this would work without this. I'm not sure when and how. There's online, I've seen it go both ways. Okay, so we say, I'm going to create a game object, current laser. So now I have a way to reference the object I just instantiated. Then what I do is I say, you know what, it has a rigid body on it. How do I get access to its rigid body? And this is in a separate video. So what I'm going to say is from my current laser, I want to dot get a specific component from it. So on here, what I'm talking about is in the inspector window. Each of these is a component. I could get its transform. I could get its sprite renderer. Now, the laser also has a rigibody 2D. That's the one I want access to because I want to be able to add a force. I want to be able to push this rigid body. It doesn't have a collider yet. I'm going to go ahead and add that right now. Just add a box collider really quick so I don't forget later on. So there's my box collider, and you know it's close enough. I'll pull in a scene and edit later. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to say, I want to get the component of type rigibody 2D. Okay, so what this just did is this just said from the laser I just created, right? This is its reference. That's the variable I can refer to it as. I want to get its rigibody 2D. Okay, so now I have it. This is now referring to the rigibody of that laser. So now I want to just dot add force. And then I can add a force in whatever direction. I'm going to take my transform.right. That's the direction this rocket is currently pointed in. And I want to times, I don't know, like let's say shoot force. Okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and, nope, that's an extra parentheses. We're good to go. Okay, so I'm going to go up here and I'm going to create, along with the float, I'm going to also create a thing called shoot force. All right, so I'm going to save this. I'm going to go back over here. And once that's loaded, I'm going to hit play. And now if I do this, oh, notice nothing happens. That's because on my rocket, the shoot force is 0. Let's try a shoot force of 10 and see what happens. Oh, dang, that's slow. Let's try a shoot force of 100. Okay, so pachoo, 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 pachoo. And now this has, oh, dang, look at that collider hitting other colliders. Let's start seeing, what the heck? So maybe rigid body wasn't great in this instance, but this is what you would want from, like, say, a cannonball, right? You would want it to bounce off walls and other cannons. Laser, maybe this isn't realistic, but that's the way you would do it, okay? I'm going to go back over the script. You would GameObject reference the thing you're creating, and then you would from it get component rigid body and out of force. All right, hope you enjoyed the video.